Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Meanwhile Here on Earth. This program features in-depth conversations with the leading names in the subjects of UFOs, abductees, the paranormal, panel discussions, and the very best and brightest of the next generation of writers and researchers. Meanwhile Here on Earth, the show breaking new ground in alternative talk with your intrepid host, veteran investigative writer and researcher, Peter Robbins.
Hello again, and welcome back to Meanwhile Here on Earth on KGRA Digital Broadcasting. Should you miss a show that we do on Monday nights anywhere along the line, you can watch or listen at no cost at KGRA Digital Broadcasting or on KGRA's YouTube channel for several days following the broadcast. If you subscribe to KGRA, you have access to their huge archive of thousands of programs. And if you use my name, Peter, P-E-T-E-R, I know that's a rough one, as your code, when you subscribe, you'll receive 30% off your monthly or yearly subscriptions. You also have the option of a completely free 3-day trial, and the first 30 plus shows that we recorded this year are permanently embedded on YouTube until the sun burns out. You can also listen, no video, but you can listen to this show anytime at no cost on Spreaker.com, S-P-R-E-A-K-E-R. We're dispensing with a monologue today to go right into our show because we have a very special one with my guest tonight, Dr. Irena Scott. She is an American author and psychologist who received a BS from Ohio State University, her MS from the University of Nevada, and a PhD from the University of Missouri in the Department of Veterinary Medicine. Her postdoctoral studies were done right up the road from me at Cornell University. She has been employed as an assistant professor in the Department of Biology at St. Bonaventure University and has done research and teaching at the Ohio State University, the University of Missouri, and the University of Nevada, and at Battelle Memorial Institute. She worked in related fields for many years and studied species including bonobos and their behavior. She was a correspondent for Popular Mechanics magazine and also worked as a volunteer astronomer at the Ohio State University Radio Observatory. She also has participated in UFO investigations for the Defense Intelligence Agency and Center for UFO Studies. She is the author of 6 books, including on UFOs, and has contributed chapters and articles to several scientific journals, magazines, and newspapers. Her listings include Who's Who in the world's Who's Who of Women, Who's Who in the Midwest, Dictionary of International Biology, and Who's Who in Frontier Science and Technology. Her 2008 book, Uncle, My Journey with John Purdue, is a biography of John Purdue, founder of Purdue University and of the Purdue block in Lafayette, Indiana. The foreword is by William Allen, author of Starkweather, Inside the Mind of a Teenage Killer, Arkansas, The Life of a Texas Coastal County. The book is the first of the Founders series published by the Purdue University Press. And Irena Scott, it is a pleasure to welcome you today to Meanwhile Here on Earth.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's a very high honor to be here.
Well, I'm not so sure how high the honor is, but it's sure our honor to have you as a guest. You and I have yet to meet in person, but as they say, your reputation precedes you. And when I read your background, I couldn't help thinking how many disciplines that you have obviously become focused in, accomplished in, and then gone on to the next. I know in natural research, one subject for an inquisitive mind inevitably leads to related and seemingly unrelated areas of study. But I'd like to start at the beginning because you've been kind enough to share a wonderful assortment of images. And the first one that you sent is a perfect starter. So, who are these good people?
Well, the first one with the horses was my father and I really started out on what seemed to me the Stone Age because we were farming with horses back then.
Yes, in fact, let's go back to that image. Yes.
I forget their names. One was a mother and one was a son horse, and they were a team of horses for a while.
And these folks, I'm going to make an educated guess, are where you come from.
No, this is my grandfather, and he was a preacher. He was my mother's father, the one with the book. And I think some of his congregation, I think. And he was a circuit preacher, and so they preached in several different churches, and my mother's family moved about every 2 years, which none of them liked too well.
Yeah.
And that's my mother's father and mother when they were older.
Yeah. And where was this picture taken, Irena?
I don't know, probably in Ohio, but he preached at a lot of different, it might have been Nellie, Ohio, but I don't know. He preached at a lot of different churches. And that's my mother on the right and her siblings when they were kids. Wow. I guess they all wore bows in their head back then.
Do you know if that's the house they grew up in that they're photographed against?
I doubt it because I think they moved quite often.
Yeah.
It could be, but it's probably one they were living in, but I think they moved pretty often. And that's my grandparents on my father's side and my father and his brother. And that's the house they hand-built themselves. And that's the house I'm living in now.
I love it.
It's a house with 7 gables because my grandfather liked that book, and so he made gables.
Wow. I'm a little dumbstruck. First, it's a gorgeous house. And
it certainly is.
To think that you are every day in contact with that much of your family heritage. Where is the house located? Where do you live, Irena?
It's north of Columbus. We're in a farm, so it's not actually near a town. Probably our closest town is a little tiny town called Africa, Ohio, population 11 or so.
That's a very small town.
Yes.
I'm lingering on it just because it's so exquisite and obviously an incredibly solid house.
They collected the rocks themselves, and it's called an arts and craft architecture. Like Frank Lloyd Wright or something.
Yes.
And they had an architect that designed it, but somebody broke into the lockbox and stole the design, and so none of us know who the architect was.
Oh, no. Were you born in this house or born at a nearby hospital?
I was born next door in a hospital, but I lived next door. Wow. And our house next door was my great-great-great-grandfather had come to Ohio in about 1803 and found an old deserted cabin and moved in. And that later they built a house, but that's where I grew up, next door, from the very first relative that was on the farm.
Yeah. Given the times and the tradition in American families, your mother was a full-time mother and not working an outside job, I'm going to assume?
No. Well, when we were young, but then, I think she was bored to death. And she started working in several places, secretary and things like that.
Good for her. And what did your dad do for a living?
He was a farmer. He just stayed on the farm and worked.
Wow. Any special crops that they specialized in, or the general farm in terms of crops and animals?
What we sold was wool and eggs mainly. We had a big truck that came from what was called the co-op, and we sold our eggs. And my sister and I used to work in the basement cleaning eggs every night.
Yeah.
And gathering eggs from the chicken house. And we had sheep, and they sheared the sheep.
So you grew up. You have memories of watching the sheep being sheared, and early memories of accompanying. Is that your sister or brother?
You're still showing the picture of.
Yeah, it's still showing the picture of the home.
Yeah, that's my grandparents and my father and his brother.
Oh, got it. Okay, yeah. And moving along, gorgeous.
That's me.
Wow.
And we were pretty primitive, and that's called a pump. And
I've read about them. So no running water in the kitchen?
We got it later. My sister and I remember going to get it, and we were so thrilled to be sterilized. But when I was young, we went out and pumped the water and carried it in and heated it on the stove and things.
Boy, you grew up in a tradition that goes back several centuries.
Yeah, I know.
How extraordinary to have that experience, like you say, from Stone Age to Space Age. But you grew up in real contact with nature. I mean, that was a huge part of your life. Animals, plants, seeing life and death in the natural realm as a young child, which I think inadvertently is kind of a gift. It equips you for life in a way that, a modern upbringing does not necessarily.
Yeah, I was aware of death when I was very, very, very young because the animals would die. And I was kind of terrified of dead things because I didn't understand what they were. And if like a chicken died or something, he made me carry it out and throw it out in the field. Yeah. And so I sort of got used to death, but it was sort of terrifying to me when I was young. I mean, it still is,
sure.
But in a different way.
But at the same time, understanding, even in a rudimentary way, the cycle of life at a younger age, I think that's a healthy thing, given the way life is and how it ends.
Yeah, they say people don't realize they die until they're, teenagers or later. Well, I sure realized it when I was very, very young.
Amen.
And that's how we got our milk. We had cows, and Dad went out and milked them, and I had to go out in the field and bring them in. I was a little bit scared of them because they had horns and they were big, but I liked going out in the field and getting them.
And I mean,
we just had two usually.
The old-fashioned, millennial old way of milking, as opposed to hooking up, a machine to the teats and pushing a button. And this was the real deal.
Yeah, he wasn't thrilled about it either. And that's me again, and that's our milk house. And after Dad milked, he would bring the milk in and put it in the milk house, and they'd strain it through, I forget what it's called. But anyway, got the flies and everything out of it. Wow. And then put it in some water to cool it down.
Now, you grew up in a time when, I mean, again, technologically, there wouldn't have been a TV in the house. There was a radio, I assume?
Yeah, we weren't too in contact with the media, though, because my parents we had a radio, but they just played particular programs, so we didn't get a broad idea of things that went on.
Do you remember any of the shows that you listened to as a child?
Yeah, Ohio had a big, powerful station, and they had the Midwestern Hayride, and they had a talk show called The Ruth Lyons Show, and I remember that from way, way, way back.
Neat.
And that's the road in front of our house. It was a gravel road, and lots of times it had grass growing up through it. And that little truck is a milk truck. And people sold the milk to each other, and the little milk truck picked up the milk and took it to somebody else. And it was not pasteurized milk.
Yeah, exactly. Such another time. When you didn't have, obligations and chores, what did play consist of for you? Board games, just fantasy kind of things of, what was it? What was play to you when you were a child?
I think cowboys and Indians were sort of the thing.
I got in on that one.
I guess that was, I don't remember too much.
Not a lot of playtime.
There's a lot of work to do, actually.
Yeah, a working farm is incredibly demanding, even in modern times. But when there's stuff that has to be done, and it has to be done within a certain time parameter, because if not, you will lose crops or, cows get ill. I think, again, something most people in what we'll laughingly call modern life have very little appreciation of. And
that's our wool wagon.
Wow.
Each of those little bundles is the wool off a sheep. That's my father and his brother, and our horses. And I think they took him to market someplace. I don't know where. I don't remember. I think another little town in the area.
And, given the nature of, if you're living on a working farm, you are getting a lot of the food that you're eating from what you're raising. You're not going to the supermarket every week. You were aware that the chickens or the lamb that you were eating, that you used to see those guys or gals when they were alive.
Yeah, and I didn't like meat very
well. Did you go on to become a vegetarian?
Well, my sister is a very strict vegetarian, but I eat a little fish and things. I don't eat a whole lot of meat now, but I really didn't like meat when I was a kid.
Do you think that's part of the reason, because you knew that it came from...
We were eating our friendly pets, which I wasn't thrilled about.
Yeah, it's awkward. Most people might understand it better. And yes, the cat is gone, but enjoy your dinner.
Yeah. And our road had a covered bridge, and that was a covered bridge.
A classic. Wow, what a part of rural American life.
And this was the first incursion of civilization into the area. It was a high tension metal wire, and that little circle on the top is me. When they put it in, I had to climb to the top. So I did. That was pretty idiotic. But
well, yes. And I would, if you lost your grip, I would definitely be having another guest on tonight, wouldn't I?
Yeah. But I wasn't worried.
Do you want to share with us about how tall that tower was?
It was pretty tall. I mean, I don't know. I think it was probably over 100 feet tall, maybe more than that.
Well, I salute you for your intrepid
stupidity,
risk-taking.
That's a good word.
And up until this time, did you have any direct electricity in the house?
Yeah, we had electricity, but that was when the big things started coming in.
Right. And well, way to go, girl.
That was my first aerial picture. That's straight down from the top of the high tension wire tower.
You, this could have been your last photograph if things had worked out properly. Damn.
My brain hadn't grown yet.
That's one way to state it. Yeah. But obviously, you knew when you were growing up, you were going to document this. And
Yes, that was my first aerial photograph of the farm.
wow.
And that's another aerial photograph. That was the next incursion of civilization. And at the top left is a road going through, and that's the interstate freeway. And that was the next thing that went through.
Okay.
It's I-71. It's a big freeway. And the farm right there beside the road, this is our road that went through up and down.
Yeah.
And the farm right beside the freeway is our farm. And it was the first, I think it was the first time Mom and Dad ever put money in the bank, is when they had to sell land for the freeway.
Yes. Yes. Did it change your life much, being that much closer to a main artery of civilization, laughingly called?
Yeah, well, I left home about that time, so my life definitely changed quite a bit.
How old were you then?
17 or 18, I guess.
Okay. Now, going back some, did you, how did you get to school? Was it close enough to walk, or did you have to take a bus, or your parents dropped you off, or how did you go to school?
We took a school bus.
Yeah.
One of our neighbors drove it, and he had, I think his wife was a relative, and anyway, he either came from Germany or his parents did, and he used to sing hymns at the top of his lungs all the time he drove the bus, and my sister and I knew all kinds of hymns, including German hymns. And surprised people.
Were your parents readers much? I mean, they obviously didn't have a lot of luxury time, but were there books in the house? Did you get the reading habit from them, so to say, or develop it on your own?
My father, one of his favorite saying was, "I'd rather have a skeleton in the house than a book." And he wasn't real academic. I think Mom wanted to be a writer, but we didn't have books in the house for quite a while.
Yeah. Was there a local library that you could start availing yourself, or something at school where you could take books out?
Yeah, I visited some of my neighbors and relatives, and they had books and things.
Did you master reading fairly young? Do you remember about what age you were capable of reading what we'll call adult level books rather than books written specifically for children?
I don't know. I read anything I could get my hands on. So, there were a lot of books, and I read whatever I had.
Amen. When you were able to start being more selective about your reading, was there one subject or one type of book, novels, science books, history books, that you felt drawn to, or you just were omnivore and read what you could on a lot of subjects?
I was real interested in astronomy. It's something that just hit me when I was a real young kid, before I even knew what it was. And then if I got a chance to read about astronomy or physics or something like that, I was just fascinated.
Did that interest begin simply the way it does for countless people over time, by just looking at the sky, especially at night?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember having nothing to do with UFOs per se and the implications of truly anomalous UFOs and other intelligences out there, having a thought that maybe we're not alone and maybe there are other living beings out there somewhere?
I don't know. I think I was just wondering what was going on out in the universe, and I was just interested in everything. I was interested in physics and how bodies move around and everything else.
Was the school that you were going to, elementary school, what we would have now called middle school, junior high school, were they fairly substantial and good size, or were they also quite rural and, modest in their means?
Well, my grade school, up until the 8th grade, I think we had a huge class. I think there were over 30 people in it. And then my high school, I think there were about 60. And it was a combination of several grade schools. I mean, that seemed big to, it's nothing nowadays,
Yeah.
but it seemed big back then.
By the time you were 10 or 12 years old, did you have a thought in your mind of what you wanted to do when you were one of these people we used to call grown-ups?
Yeah, I wanted to be an astronomer. I knew about that.
That early. Wow. And by the time you left home at 17 or so, you were off to higher education at that point.
Yeah. Then I started in Ohio State, and I started majoring in astronomy. But everybody always told me I can't be an astronomer. And then I started applying for jobs, and I couldn't because they were male only.
Oh,
and
God.
So every place I went, they said, no females, you can't apply. They wouldn't give me an application. So it was very disappointing.
And you were told you couldn't be an astronomer because you weren't a man?
Yeah. People told me that, from when I was a kid.
Well, they got that wrong.
Well, they were right.
I don't know. It's still mind-boggling to me that that's the way the world is, to a lesser degree now, but still. And you graduated from Ohio State with your bachelor's degree. And at that point, what was the first job that you took when you got out there in the world?
Well, I had to change my major. I was working my way through school, and I had to change it to something that hired females. So I changed it to biology, and I had to change my minor. And so working your way through, I had to pay for that and that extra time. But when I got out, I still wanted to be an astronomer. And so I didn't apply for biology jobs. I found out that they were mapping the moon and things like that, cartographers. And so I thought maybe I'll get in the back door and do some astronomy. So I applied to the ACIC in St. Louis, the Aeronautical Chart and Information Center, and got a job as a cartographer. And they sent us to 6 months of cartography school. And if you flunked 2 courses, you were out. But I managed to get through it. And I guess it was about, they made like charts for airplanes, and like they wanted people that were careful. So they, were pretty stringent. And so the airplanes didn't crash and all that. And so I worked in that for several years, but I never got into astronomy. I never got to map the moon or anything.
So just to go back for a moment, you were told you couldn't be an astronomer because you weren't a man, but apparently biologists can be women, or that was acceptable?
Yeah, that was open to women.
Well, how nice of them.
Yeah. And then to go back to the farm.
Yes.
I'm skipping back here because this is things I found out later. When I left the farm, I just thought we were poor farmers and educated and everything.
Yeah.
And one of my relatives died and left a whole lot of documents and letters and everything. And my mother started reading them, and we found out a lot more about our farm. And for one thing, it became a historic Ohio homestead. It's in the family for several generations, but ours was many generations because it started about 1803.
Do you know your family lineage, Scottish Irish or English, or I'm just guessing here, but
yeah, I think I did Ancestry.com, and it's English and Scotch and Irish and Dutch and German and a whole lot of things.
European, to be sure.
Yeah. And here,
yes.
This is one of the things we found out. There was a big picture of John Purdue in my relative's house, and I never knew who he was. I just thought it was an oil painting. But when my mother found the found the documents, she found all his Purdue stuff and started figuring out who he was. And it turned out he was the founder of Purdue, and he was our relative, and we were descended from the Purdue family. And so then after that, quite a bit later, I did a lot of research on him. My cousin and I traveled around to the places where he lived and things. And I wrote a book about him, which is the next slide. And Purdue University published it, which was pretty amazing.
I'll say.
But
this is your first published book.
Well, no, I mean, I had published a lot of scientific things, but this was my first book on my own that wasn't part of my work. But he started out in a tiny little log cabin in Pennsylvania. That's not his log cabin, but that's a Purdue log cabin that my cousin and I found close to us in Ohio that one of the Purdue family had built. So, the one he grew up in was smaller than that. I think it was 16 by 20, and his mother had 10 kids.
Good Lord.
And he left home when he was 12, and that's all the education he had. And he showed up in Ohio. His family and his mother and his father died. His mother was in her 60s, and they moved to Ohio. And it was a real traumatic journey, and one of his sisters died on the way. But he showed up in Ohio just in rags, and no money, no or anything, just a bum, and asked for a job teaching school because he had a little bit of education, and he got it. And so he started out as a school teacher, and I think he really liked that, but it didn't pay much. And then he started a store and went into business with another person, and then he bought a land further north in Ohio and drove hogs for a while. And then he moved to Lafayette, Indiana, and he just took off like crazy then. He founded this place called the Purdue Block, which was Lafayette, Indiana. It was bigger than Chicago back then. And
oh my gosh.
It was the largest business district west of Wall Street. And it was probably the original strip mall.
Unbelievable.
And he financed a bridge and started 5 or 6 companies that were just really big companies. And he had offices in New York and had a top business in New York and in Chicago and in Lafayette. And he just did an amazing amount of things. Besides being a founder of Purdue University, he gave money to a lot of other universities. And my relatives said he gave money to like every university in Ohio. And I found record, the only place I looked was Otterbein University in Ohio. And I found his donation there, and he had helped to restore it after a fire. And so Otterbein continued to be there. But he donated to a lot of schools. He was really interested in education, probably because he didn't get any.
Yeah.
And he was around a lot of lawyers and people with education, and he probably felt inferior. He had a real strong German accent and wasn't too educated, but he was founding universities.
I'm a little dumbstruck. I mean, a lot of people talk about the American dream and creating something out of literally nothing. And then that spirit of giving and being there for other people and giving them opportunities that you didn't have. This is the kind of person that we should all look to for inspiration and keeping the bar set very high in your behavior toward your fellow person. What a remarkable life that he lived.
It was just amazing what he did. And he lived a long time too, and lived a very stressful life. And that's a flyer. And Purdue University had me give a talk about him after my book was published, and that was quite an honor. And Purdue University is just huge. It's like a city. And it's one of the top universities for astronauts and space and everything. Like Neil Armstrong graduated from Purdue, and a whole lot of astronauts did.
Oh my gosh.
It has its own airport. It's just an amazing place.
Absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing.
And they were working in conjunction with Amelia Earhart too. I forget exactly how.
Oh gosh. Wow.
And that's Purdue University.
Good
It's
Lord.
a lot huger than that. You can just drive through it and go on and on and on.
It really is like a city.
And it's one of the top world universities, and especially top in the U.S. and a top engineering school too.
Absolutely amazing.
And that that was the first statue of John Purdue at the Purdue University, and they had a ceremony, and they asked me to speak, and the president of the university is there.
And there you are, right to your ancestors' right.
Yeah. And I was the first person to sit down beside him. I was thrilled about that.
Oh, that's great, Irena. That's wonderful. Wow, what a day that must have been.
That's University Hall behind him, and on his dying day, he was walking along, inspecting the university, and then he died. But I think he was at University Hall when he died around there.
Wow. Well, there's an appropriateness to that. And looking at that beautiful late Victorian Gothic structure, I'm reminded of some of the buildings on the older part of the campus that we're both familiar with up at Cornell.
Yeah. And that was just unbelievable. But they have a plaque beside his statue, and it has a quote from my book on it, my name on it, which is just unbelievable.
Oh my gosh. What an honor.
I couldn't believe it. I nearly fainted the whole time I was there.
And of all of the words they could put there, how inspiring are those?
Yeah. And then that was just other information I found out about my family from the documents. And I found out this one traced the ancestry of somebody called Hannah Chase. And I had no idea who Hannah Chase was. And I asked my mother, the genealogist, and she didn't know either. And then just by accident one day, I was in the local library wandering around, and everybody left because there was a ceremony going on. And so for some reason, I got up and started looking at what everybody else was reading. They left their books open. And so I went around reading, and I saw this book open about Hannah Chase. And I thought, well, that's interesting. We have letters about Hannah Chase. And I started reading, and I found out she was my great-great-great-grandmother, and she was written up in the book.
I love it. It's amazing. I mean, that is a piece of living history right there that you come directly from.
Yeah. And it turned out that the first people there, William and Mary Chase, came with the Winthrop fleet in 1630 in the flagship, and they thought Mary Chase was from some real rich family in England, and they did a lot of exploring about her. But then they said it was one of the top families in the country, and that just the males inherited money then. But I guess her brothers died, but she had married a Chase and gone to America. And so anyway, they didn't have genetics or anything back then, but they decided that that wasn't the right person. It was somebody else. But anyway, there was a big story about her and books written about her. And so they came, and then they were pilgrims, you'd say, in Massachusetts. And they married each other, all those Puritans and pilgrims and everything.
Yes.
And so we descended from a number of pilgrim families. And from that, I could trace it back. And I'm descended from William Brewster, his sister. He was a Mayflower leader. I didn't find any relatives that I had that were on the Mayflower, but I was descended from the family of one of them. And that also shows the Chase family. And I don't think it's exactly known how they're related, but Bishop Chase nearly founded Kenyon College, and he nearly did it on this farm, but then he moved away and did it someplace else. But his son was Salmon Chase, and he's who the Chase Bank is named after.
Oh, for gosh sakes.
He's still in our literature because, like that book, The Team of Rivals, he was in Lincoln's cabinet. He actually ran against Lincoln, but he lost and Lincoln won.
Amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it was just amazing. I could just find all these relatives, and it could go way back into the Netherlands, and the family. I could trace it way back to all these historical characters. And like, I used to think history was the most boring thing I could imagine. And then I found out I was related to these people that were boring me to death, and they were a lot more interesting after that. But another family on that is the Haviland family. And so I'm related to, like, Olivia de Havilland and Haviland Aircraft and all kinds of people from that. And then you can take it way, way back to, I mean, I found from Ancestry.com that I'm really related to them. I didn't know that. I just thought, well, these are letters. I wonder if they're right. But they were, because I can go back on Ancestry.com and find that I'm really descended from them.
Well, then you're also related to another great American actress who was a de Havilland, but went by the name of Joan Fontaine.
Uh-huh.
Of course, the sister of Olivia de Havilland. And to digress for a moment, the book you referred to, and it's a book I would recommend to anybody with even a modicum of interest in American history, Team of Enemies, written by one of our greatest and most, as far as I'm concerned, beloved American historians, Doris Kearns Goodwin, who I'm sure somebody told her that she couldn't be a historian because she was a woman, and emerged as one of our great ones. I have particular affection for her as a writer and a person, because some years before my parents moved me and my sister Helen out to a village on Long Island, about 30 miles east of Manhattan, called Rockville Center. In the 50s, Doris Kearns Goodwin grew up there, and she wrote a memoir called Wait Till Next Year, which is one of the loveliest memoirs, particularly about her relationship with her father and her passionate love of the Brooklyn Dodgers, which she shared with her father. And in the telling of the story, it was incredibly moving to me, because it brought me back to that wonderful village where I came of age, and had the best of both worlds, because in less than an hour I could be in Midtown Manhattan and soaking up the culture. But the sweep of your family connections is really quite something. I mean, it's your life, so maybe we grow used to things that are us, but for a lot of people, this is quite extraordinary. And thinking about Chase, somebody who again comes up as a very important player in Lincoln's cabinet, and he did something that was a mark of his greatness. Rather than pulling together yes men and cronies, he chose people who he knew disagreed with him. And it made for a dynamic at one of the most tenuous points in American history. I don't know that will ever be recreated again. So we have a number of great forces and people coming together at that moment, including some related to you and one indirectly who I identify with because of her connection to my home village there.
Well, that he, held the Union together, and one way he did it was to get, everybody into the same thing. And Chase was a real strong abolitionist.
Yes, he was
totally against slavery, and Lincoln was more moderate. But there were people on the other side too. So,
well, part of his wisdom was choosing people on both sides to help him, I guess, arrive at the most informed point of view he could, which was almost never popular because it was not a time when people were embracing compromise. It was defeat the other side, and we understand that today for sure.
And
no, another one of your relatives.
I don't know about that, but if you followed the family tree, it went back to William the Conqueror and a whole bunch of people like that. Yep. And so, it went to the royal family and the Adams family and all kinds of things. That was too far back for the DNA to trace, but it still was in the family tree. So I don't know.
Well, there you go. And I see you have a marvelous quote by President John Adams there that is quite wonderful to see. The United States is not a Christian nation any more than it is a Jewish or Mohammedan nation. That might shock a lot of people. But bravo, President Adams.
Yes, I thought that was pretty good.
And in any way, are you related to John Adams?
Yeah. I seem to have a lot of Adams cousins, and I can go back to several Adams ancestors.
By the end of this,
by DNA some way, but
yeah,
I'm totally sure.
By the end of our conversation, I'm going to wonder if there's any major names in American or world history that you are not related to.
Well, it was pretty interesting because we just found that, just finding that one thing just led to, all kinds of things. And I put it in the computer and I didn't know anything about genealogy. Then I just put a name in, and then I found out their ancestry and stuck that on my family tree and went on. But it turned out to be right so far as the DNA on finally Ancestry.com came out. And so I tried it, and it turned out to be right.
Amazing.
And then our farm was written up in different places, such as that was one of my photographs too of this place here. That was in a magazine. And we have a big barn on our farm.
You sure do.
After the I-70 went in, the interstate, well, it showed up from the interstate, but for the bicentennial of Ohio, they painted each barn from each county with that type of logo.
And your barn got chosen.
Yeah, our barn was one of them. Yeah. But our barn, that's it. Our barn really showed up because it was right by a freeway.
Right.
And so it made our barn's famous, and we're kind of the auxiliary that goes along with the barn. But sure. It had an internet site and everything you can imagine.
It sure is a classic.
And a famous artist just recently painted a picture of it. P. Beckley Moss, I think her name is. And they had an affair about that. And that was just recent. Wow. And what's neat now is that maybe due to the barn, and my brother-in-law was who saw it in the Wall Street Journal and who was got suggested painting our barn and everything. But now we're trying to preserve our farm.
Yes.
A park was interested in buying it and has bought it. And so our farm now will be a park, and they're going to call it the McCammon Creek Park. And so it's not going to be a development, it's going to actually be a park. So we're just thrilled about that. And we hope all our ancestors are too, if they're.
How wonderful. Very much in the spirit of John Purdue, you are giving back to the public an amazing moment in its own history. That's wonderful, Irena.
Well, I always dreamed of turning it into a park, but I never thought that was possible because it's something that would take a fortune to do. And here the park was interested in our place and bought it.
How many acres on your farm?
I don't remember. There were a bunch of farms together. My father and his parents and his brother and our great aunt and everything else. And most of it was sold, but 3 farms have gone together to be the park now. And I don't remember exactly how many acres.
Irena, I want to, before we go on to the next image, at about what time in your life did you first start to consider the subject of unidentified flying objects, what they might represent, the implications for humanity, and what was it that made you first interested in the subject?
Well, I will cover that later, but my sister.
Okay, good. Then we'll just keep going.
Okay. That's Dr. Heineck.
Yes.
And when I graduated from high school, I'm going back to that time then. And he was an astronomer at Ohio State University. He used to write an astronomy column. And I wasn't too aware of UFOs and him, but I was really interested in astronomy. And so it was sort of, I looked up to him way, way back before I knew anything about UFOs much. Of course,
he was head of astronomy studies at Northwestern.
Yeah, He was at Ohio State first, and then he went to Northwestern. And when he worked for Project Blue Book, that was the place I went to when I first started working, ACIC, and it changed to the DMA Aerospace Center. But they were making charts of like the moon and everything, and that's why I wanted to get in. And I wanted to get into astronomy, but I didn't get into it. Instead, I stayed on Earth. And that was like I said, we had 6 months of training of classes, and it was supposed to be equal to a master's degree in cartography. And that was some of the work was surveying. And that was just a government form that showed something about the school.
Mm-hmm.
And then
we come to another point in your life here.
Yeah, after that, I wasn't getting ahead in astronomy at all. So I changed jobs, and I went into the Defense Intelligence Agency, which is in the news quite a bit now. Yes. What I worked in was satellite photography and photogrammetry and photo interpretation and all that.
I'm imagining you had to go through a fairly strict background check for this job?
That's the next slide. I had a real high clearance, the sensitive compartmented information clearance that was for satellite photography. And I just recently, a couple of years ago, asked somebody, and apparently the photography that I used back then is still classified, which is pretty surprising.
I'll say.
But it was a real high clearance and a spatial clearance for satellite photography. But it was, the highest government type of clearance they had.
Gosh.
And so I was supposed to just sort of disappear, and I don't have a lot of pictures of when I was there.
Yeah, and that says something about something for sure.
And that was a satellite, one of the satellites they used to take the photography. And the next slide, yeah, that's one of the satellites that was up there taking pictures. They had an exhibit of that at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base.
And that is a perfect place for us to go to break. This is Peter Robbins on Meanwhile Here on Earth with my special guest, Dr. Irena Scott. And we will be back in 4 minutes. Don't go away.
Hello, I'm Tony Rathman, one of the hosts of KGRA's Monday night show called Entity Voices Paranormal Evidence. If you have not had the opportunity to see this show, I would like to take this opportunity to invite you. We cover fantastic paranormal evidence captured by our Entity Voices team, as well as bringing on experienced and up-and-coming investigators who share with us incredible paranormal captures.
This one I will let you give an intro to, because this actually was in a castle, and this one is titled Energy.
Oh, okay. I was in a place, my favorite castle in Scotland. It's called Balgony Castle. Beautiful place, and as a matter of fact, it's going to be one of the places we ghost on the tour. Everybody was talking, and we had a Frank's box there, an actual Frank's box sitting there. And everybody was talking, and finally, I just asked the question, and we got a pretty good answer.
Here is that clip. I love this one. This one's awesome. Here it is.
Is there anything in the castle that we should be afraid of?
The energy.
Wow, that's yeah, the energy. You know what I love about that one is the response is right after the question. So timing to it. The relevance of it is not only answering the question, answering it appropriately. You asked, is there anything to be afraid of? It clearly said the energy. The other thing I love is it has an accent. I don't want to pick which European accent, but there is an accent. So let me play that one more time.
It's definitely a Scottish accent. Definitely.
Okay. Here it is again.
Is there anything in the castle that we should be afraid of?
Yeah. That's incredible.
What's even more amazing about that is
watch us live on KGRADB.com on Monday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern and 6 p.m. Pacific Time. As a special bonus, if you enjoy Entity Voices Paranormal Evidence and would like to support the show and the entire KGRA network of shows, please use promo code 21EVPE to receive a 30% yearly discount to Entity Voices Paranormal Evidence and the entire network of shows on KGRA. Thank you. And we hope to see you in the chat room Monday nights for Entity Voices Paranormal Evidence. And don't forget, stay haunted.
And welcome back to Meanwhile Here on Earth with Peter Robbins and my guest, Dr. Irena Scott. Irena, I was so engrossed in what you were saying that I neglected to put one image in sequence. So let's go to it right now, and you can tell us what we're seeing here.
That's Lowry Air Force Base in Colorado. And when I was at the DIA, they sent me to a lot of schools. And so that was my first experience of being out west, living in Denver. The airport in front. I think the one behind is Stapleton. I think they moved it out of Denver later. I forgot to look that up. But
oops, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway,
when I was working for the DIA, one section I was in was air order of battle, and I was supposed to. The work was identifying airplanes from satellite photography, and there were some things that happened that made me think way back then that the DIA probably knows a lot more about UFOs than anybody says.
Yes.
And today, I think the ATIP program was under the DIA. And so the things like the videos they released and things came from the DIA, actually. So it's a big player today in the tiny amount of disclosure that's coming out.
Yeah, indeed.
And so I think, all that was under the DIA.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, back in those days, I thought the DIA knows more about UFOs than they said. There were some things that made me think so. Later, I got married, and that was my husband, John Scott.
And obviously, wedding photograph of your hand.
Yeah. I thought I'd just put him in.
And what did your husband do?
He was in computers. But when we got married, we moved out to Nevada. And that was because he was living in Nevada and working. But that was because he had, before that, worked in Area 51, believe it or not. It was back before anybody heard of Area 51.
Wow.
But so he'd left. He was no longer working in Area 51, but he's still in Nevada and still in Las Vegas.
Would it be inappropriate to ask you if he ever spoke at all with you about what he was involved in doing in that highly classified area?
He had a Q clearance. I think he told me, and I think I wasn't real interested. I could go back and do that again in my life and change a whole lot, but it seems like I remember we drove around Nevada, and sometimes he'd show us, where Area 51 was. I mean, we couldn't see it, but where he'd been and things like that. And I didn't pay too much attention to it at the time, which I totally regret now.
Of course. I have visited the perimeter, and I think most people really don't have a sense of how large this area called Area 51 is. It's the size of Holland.
Well, he lived in Mercury, Nevada, and they took him to work in a bus. I think sometimes he left from Las Vegas and McCarran, but they had special flights. But I think generally he lived in Mercury, Nevada. And that was his discharge from the Air Force, and said Nellis Air Force Base and everything. I mean, it obviously didn't say Area 51, but he was on the test site.
Nellis,
and that's,
yeah. Exactly.
And we had a lot of, I started to work at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and then got accepted in the master's program, and they had a lot of, I majored in physiology later, but they had a lot of all kinds of research going on. And like the Hoover Dam is out there, and that's what fueled Las Vegas and made it grow.
Yeah.
That's Hoover Dam. It was the biggest dam that they ever made then, and tons of cement, and they had to figure out how to cool the cement and make it in a certain time frame and everything. But and it powers a whole area of the country, like clear to Los Angeles, I think.
Yeah. When you say you majored in physiology, was that a general area of study, or was it in animal physiology?
Well, in UNLV, I majored in biology, and then later when I went for my PhD, it was physiology.
Got it. Okay.
And but I did a lot of things besides physiology, and I was working under an ecologist and did my research on a species of chipmunk that had a very wide range. But being working for a ecologist, I did a lot of other things too, such as stuffing animals. And there's a monkey I stuffed, and a beaver or something, and a skunk, and all kinds of things. There was a big variety. And that was one of my office mates, and everybody was pretty interested in all kinds of animals. He was real interested in photography. I don't know whatever happened to him, but he was putting together a taxidermy antelope there.
Yeah.
And my other office mate was, I was in an office with a museum, and my other office mate turned into a museum top person in a Las Vegas museum, and really instituted programs and everything. But I found out he's dead now. And then afterwards, the next slide that you were just showing, I got accepted. Well, back one. Anyway.
Right.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, I got accepted into the College of Veterinary Medicine of the University of Missouri. And we did a lot of studies on different types of animals you can go on, such as burrows. That wasn't really my topic of subject. That was just a burrow that I was working on.
Yeah.
But I did a study of cattle and how to get them adapted to warm climates, and measured their hormones and things to figure out how to naturally adapt them to a warm climate. Yeah. And we had a climatology lab where we had cattle, and we could change the temperature and everything. That's me catheterizing a cow. And I did a lot of that and studied their hormone profiles and things like that at different types of heat exposure. And that's the climatology lab with another animal in it. And after that, I went to Cornell University and did several studies. It was a postdoc, and one of them was mentioned there was of laboratory white mice. And I discovered that they can enter a form of hibernation at night, and their body temperature goes down, and their metabolic rate goes down. This was pretty significant because white mice are used in all kinds of experiments everywhere, and I don't think anybody knew that.
How long were you at Cornell in the postgraduate program?
I think it was just about a year and a half or so.
Enough to experience one of our charming winters.
Oh. Well, I remember there was snow until I got once I walked to my lab. It was about a mile away, and I thought the radio said that the temperature was 32, and I thought that's not bad. So I went
32 below.
It said I thought it was 32, and I walked, and then I came back, and the wind was blowing toward me, and I couldn't breathe, and I couldn't figure out what was wrong. I couldn't run, and I couldn't breathe, and when
Your lungs were being frozen.
It was minus 32, and I had heard it wrong.
And of course, the university is situated up on a hill overlooking the town, so you get nothing blocking the wind. It is really quite an experience. You could now be stationed in the Antarctic and have all your training done already.
That was right. I mean, I about died that night. I thought I'd never make it back.
Oh.
And then I joined the faculty of St. Bonaventure University, and it was nice, and I wanted to. It was a tenure track job, but my husband lost his job in New York. He was head of Tioga County data processing or something, but he lost his job. I think it was a sort of political job.
Yeah.
And then he got a good one in Ohio, in Columbus. My family was there, and so I decided to leave, although I kind of liked the job.
Yeah.
And in Ohio, I had a number of positions: the Ohio State University Medical School, the Ohio Department of Health, the Tell Memorial Institute, Popular Mechanics Magazine, the Ohio State University Radio Observatory. I started a Christmas tree farm, and I was at Google for a while. And those things sound like they would have anything to do with UFOs, but they did in some ways.
I was going to say, coming up to it.
Well, one thing was when I worked for the Ohio Department of Health, they sent you to places all over. And some places where they sent me for conferences was Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And it's famous for UFOs. It's where Project Blue Book took place.
Yep.
It's where the Roswell debris was sent. It's where there's all sorts of legends and everything, that there's bodies in there and everything else. And so I was in the secured area for some of the conferences. And I didn't ask anybody if I could, but I got around all over and took every picture I could think of every place I could do.
So your interest was already piqued in the subject of the UFO phenomena at this point.
Yeah, but I was dormant, or what you'd call it, in the closet. But,
perfectly stated.
Yes. And that's one of, they have a lot of stories about reverse engineering.
Yes.
And that's sort of a joke, but that's one of the reverse engineered UFOs. And it looked nice, but it didn't fly very well.
Yeah. And of course, there was the Avro-like homing disc. And aside from the other wonderful legends, myths, rumors about this extraordinary base and Hangar 18, they do have one of the greatest air museums in the world. It took me hours to get through it. I like a kid with my jaw askew looking at these machines going from, the Wright brothers up until some point in the future, as you know.
Yeah, and that's what everybody knows about Wright-Patterson as a museum, and it's just wonderful. I mean, like they have the space shuttle there now, and all kinds of things.
SR-71.
Yeah, and I have a picture of me beside the SR-71. But I
actually saw one in flight once.
Wow.
Completely random. I was early in the days that I was researching the Rendlesham Forest incident in the late 1980s, and just happened to be in the forest at the right moment when one of these things made a rare daylight takeoff and came roaring over.
Wow.
To this day, it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen aerodynamically in the sky. And then within a minute had turned around and was heading east and probably in New York in 90 minutes or something. Absolutely breathtaking. And let's remember, this is 1950s technology.
Yeah, and they no longer make it. And it was sort of a stealth too. And it could travel many times the speed of sound, and for a long distance too.
Yeah.
But anyway, the slide before that was Wright-Patterson, and that was I was in the secured area, and most of the buildings were just like regular buildings. But that building really stood out because it had all this monitoring equipment around it. And I wondered what it was. And then later I attended a UFO meeting in that building. I had met the archivist of Wright-Patterson, and he invited us to this UFO meeting. But much later than that, I found out that was the famous Blue Room of Wright-Patterson.
Oh, for gosh sakes.
Somebody, it was in I think Witness to Roswell, or maybe it was inside the real Area 51 by Smith and Carey, where they, Bragola wrote FIOA, and they said, yeah, that's the building that's the Blue Room. And it looked to me like from all that monitoring,
yeah,
there was probably a area underneath it and the vault and everything else. But when I was there, I was escorted, so I didn't get to wander around look for bodies or anything.
It's amazing that you got in there. And Don Schmidt and Tom Carey, of course, two of the most prolific writer, researchers, investigators ever in UFO studies. And for me, two of our finest contributors and, of course, specialists on Roswell. Also two of the nicest guys ever in the work. So this issue of IUR, which is the International UFO Reporter, what brings us to this?
Well, I also worked at Battelle, and it had UFO studies too. And for Project Blue Book, the Spatial Report 14. Yeah.
Tell us about this book that you wrote.
Okay, that's my book, Sacred Corridors. And it contains, first of all, a lot of my photography of the secured area of Wright-Patterson. And the rest of it is an investigation of the FR 14, Special Report 14 study.
Yes.
And Jenny Zeidman, who worked for Dr. Hynek and for Blue Book and for Battelle, did an extensive study of the study SR 14, Special Report 14. And I had a lot of her notes in there. And I also she corresponded with Dr. Hynek for a long time afterwards. And it was just an informal correspondence of he was writing, longhand letters and things.
Sure.
And I included that too. So I had a lot about Battelle and Hynek and Wright-Patterson in it.
I remember years ago coming up through the ranks how exciting it was to me to actually get a copy of the Special Report 14 and, of course, read it cover to cover without missing a word. Those are the moments that, you feel yourself growing more knowledgeable about this subject in a way that is entirely credible and very well documented.
What's a really good study, and Bruce Maccabee went through it and said, that it was, it proved like one chance out of a million that UFOs are real. And I went through, it's probably pretty boring, but I went through their statistics and redid them. And I thought it was a lot more like one chance out of a trillion or something. That by the type of statistical study they did, that statistically, UFOs are something that exists, and by a very high probability.
Yeah.
And recently I published an article in the MUFON Journal about a whistleblower document from Battelle, that Battelle study, and called The First Disclosure. That was a Pinnacle memo. And that was done when the Robertson panel was being conducted, and they had a bunch of real high-class, super top scientists study UFOs, but none of them knew anything about UFOs. And so they supplied them the information. And there was a memo from Battelle that somebody leaked. And you don't know if it was one person or several people, but he leaked it. That Battelle, they were supposed to use that in the study from Battelle. And it was leaked that the study wasn't ready yet, and they shouldn't have the Robertson panel meeting. But they had it. And that shows that while the Air Force was debunking UFOs and saying they don't exist, nothing exists, we understand everything in the universe, UFOs can't exist. At the same time, they were at Battelle studying it and had a top secret study.
Yeah.
But we never found out who was the leaker.
Of course.
I noticed that one of the top people there was later the president of Battelle that was on the memo.
Yeah, and of course, we're talking about early 1952 here. And at that time, Dr. Hynek was living something of a double life before 71, when he basically walked away from the intelligence community and became the distinguished and respectable and respectful leader of the field until he passed.
Well, he started out, I guess they asked him, he was an astronomer, and, at first he probably was a debunker. And so that, if somebody said, oh, I saw a UFO land in my yard, well, he can say, oh, it's Venus. And that was his job.
That's
but
right.
He actually listened to people and had a scientific mind.
Yes.
And, began to doubt the word from the government.
Yeah.
And, but he stayed on because he wanted to find out what was going on. And the only way he could do that was to stay on.
Exactly. One of the history of UFO studies ironies.
And this is when they did that study, it was a statistical study, and they were designing a questionnaire to get really good data from observations such as what color are the UFOs, how many are there, and things like that. And so they should have had statisticians and psychologists and stuff. But what they hired was metallurgists. Exactly. And it was a secret study, but nobody knew why they were doing metallurgists. And another person and I published an article back in the 1990s about this man, Elroy John Center, whose name is there, who back in the 1950s, he told people he was working on metal from a UFO crash in Roswell. And nobody knew anything about that because the Roswell book of Stanton Friedman came out in the 1980s. And he told, this other person in the 1950s that he was doing that. So we published, and it went on. They put it in the book Witness to Roswell, which was published in the 1990s.
Yeah.
But then people said that this might have been memory metal. So, from UFOs, and Battelle was studying that way back then, possibly.
Yeah. Witness to Roswell, along with Children of Roswell, are two, I think, of the finest witness account-driven books. People sometimes deride witnesses. You can't trust their take. It's a shock kind of situation. We get it. But multiply witnessed, credible individuals with nothing to gain except to want to get their accounts on record count for something more than a lot of people think. And nobody better than Schmidt and Carey to document that. Both very fine books.
Well, also, like that thing I just showed, there were almost 1 million views. I put John Center and my name and Battelle, and it really made the news.
Oh my gosh!
Right there, so it drew a lot of attention. Yeah. And we had that man, John Center. He was a metallurgist and a manager and a top scientist that told somebody that, and he didn't tell a newspaper or anything because it was highly classified. But he just told a possible future son-in-law who he talked to and knew. But the study was top secret at the time. So
and going on to, is this a radio astronomy telescope that we're looking at here?
Yeah, that's the Ohio State University radio telescope, and I worked there for a while too. And I actually got to be an astronomer, which I was absolutely thrilled about. It was volunteer work though.
Even if I'm amazed they let you do it because you're a girl. Well, what the hell?
Well, back then, I mean, finally you could do that after I already had a degree in or vet degree. That's
yes.
a selfie with Bob Dixon, the director of the telescope. And what's interesting about it is that it's the wow signal, which is
Yes.
the only thing that people consider possible, a possible signal from ET still.
Yeah. And we can see part of you there to the left.
Yeah, I didn't get a very good selfie there, but you can see half of me.
Well, yes, a very famous moment in terms of that signal being made public for sure.
And the next slide shows that's Jerry Eman. He's the person that wrote wow beside it and found the signal.
Yeah.
And the big arrow there points, this was a display at the Ohio Historical Society, and they actually displayed one of my UFO books with the telescope material. And I was thrilled to death because they say, CETA doesn't have anything to do with UFOs and things. Well, they put my book there on UFOs, and I was thrilled to death about it.
It's a great honor. At that time, of course, the level of ridicule around the subject for academics and astronomers was off the chart. And you could be belittled or even have your reputation threatened by being one of those crazy people that took this obvious nonsense seriously.
Or lose your job, which people did.
Yeah, that's right. You reflect poorly on the institution. Good luck to you in the future.
And that was my book that was on display there.
That's beautiful.
So anyway, I got to be an astronomer for a while, which was pretty nice.
Well, the world of astronomy missed a great opportunity by not allowing you in.
Well, I missed a huge opportunity because that's what I really wanted to do.
Yeah. Not that you have spent your time in a cavalier manner.
I also worked for Popular Mechanics, and I got my name on some of the articles there and got some of my photography in it.
Yeah.
But I didn't write anything about UFOs, and I also took flying lessons.
I love it.
But I didn't get a pilot's license yet, although I'm still taking flying lessons. I mean, I have more to take, and I plan to take them sometime. I have time.
I, like many others, hope you certainly complete for that pilot's license. Yeah.
And that was a nice little airplane that has a parachute that comes out of the top so that if you make a mistake, you don't crash it. Happen if you can land.
A nice feature.
Yeah. And that was me about 8 years old. And that was my first flying lesson. That was out off our cow shed. And seeing if my parachute would work, but it didn't.
You just brought back a profound childhood memory for me, which was on a dare, understanding basics of physics at 8 years old, jumping off of my childhood friend's garage, holding an open umbrella, knowing that it would function as a parachute did. It still was a rough landing, but...
Well, mine was a rougher one. My friends were smart enough to use an umbrella too, but I didn't. I used a strap.
Well,
I was dumb.
Yeah, I'll put that right up there. Not quite with climbing the tower, but
it was close.
We both took some ridiculous risks as kids. That's for sure.
Yes,
that's a wonderful photo.
And then you asked me about my experience with UFOs. Well, I wrote them up in a book, Inside the Lightning Ball.
Mm.
And I had a number of experiences, and they started early, before I knew anything about what a UFO was.
Can you give us an example of one of those experiences, Irena?
Yeah, it's in the next slides. My sister and I, when we were kids, our old farmhouse, we slept in an attic type room.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't understand what happened to us until later. But until much later, when Jenny Randles published her book Star Children and talked about children having childhood sightings of globes or balls of light or something in their bedrooms.
Yes.
Bedroom sightings. And then sometimes later they grow up and the same people have adult sightings. And she mentioned us in her book called Repeater Sightings sometimes. And what happened to us, like I said, we didn't have books or anything back then. We just had a radio.
Yeah.
But so we didn't know anything about flying saucers or UFOs or aliens or anything else.
Sure.
We just knew a little bit about the Midwestern Hayride or whatever was on the radio.
Right.
But she was about 4 and I was about 6. I think I was in school and she thinks she wasn't in school yet. But I woke up and this thing was flying around the room. And it looked like a little piece, actually the Tic Tac is famous now. And this just looked like a literal Tic Tac. It looked like a cough drop or something, but it was glowing and it looked like hot metal and it looked like hot iron.
Wow.
And I had no idea what it was, but it was flying around the room. And it got close to us several times, but I noticed that it seemed to know where it was. I mean, it was, the room was dark and we'd gone to sleep and it was late at night. And it was a clear night. And we all remember that, but I'm sure it was for other reasons. There wasn't a storm or anything. And this thing was flying around, but it seemed to be able to see or something because it didn't bump into any walls or anything. It would go around the furniture and go around the room, but it didn't bump into anything. And it was on all the time. It wasn't anything like a lightning bug. And that's a picture of the room. So I wondered what on earth this was. And then it flew up to the ceiling, and it flew up across the ceiling. The room had 2 doors and a window, and the doors were closed, and the window was screened, so we don't know how it got in there.
Sure.
It flew across flew up to the ceiling, and then it didn't bump into the ceiling. It turned, it flew over the chandelier, and it didn't feel its way around. It just seemed to know where the walls were and the chandelier was. And so it began to circle the chandelier, and it circled and circled and circled. And then it came down and it stuck in a spiral. And suddenly my sister and I just became absolutely terrified that you just couldn't believe.
Yeah.
And we started shrieking and ran out of the room. And there's a stairway there by the window. And we fell down the stairs. We were so terrified. Oh. And we couldn't get the door open. And finally we got the door open and went shrieking to our parents. And they didn't believe us. But it was like, years later, I read the Jenny Randles book about childhood sightings. And this was like that, but there were 2 of us, and we had a childhood sighting and an adult sighting together both times.
Mm.
Childhood sighting, what was funny about it was, well, for one thing, if you just did those things happen to one person. And in our case, there were 2 of us.
Yes.
And so it wasn't, somebody would have told us it was a dream if it was just one of us, but there were 2 of us. And we weren't talking to each other, but we saw the same thing. And so it was something real in a way, because we both saw it but also we both must have woke up about the same time. I think she woke up before I did. And then we both became terrified at the same time. And in thinking about it later, it was like some kind of mind control was going on. I mean, we have no idea how the thing got in the room, but when we woke up, it was flying around the room. And then suddenly, just all at once, we became terrified. And it was like, thinking about now, it's like there was some kind of mind control going on. Although
yes,
we don't know what the thing was, and it was just a little tiny thing. But there must have been more going on besides that. would be my opinion. And then we had an adult sighting, and that was a real involved sighting. That it had strange lights, a car chase, and encounter with a weird being, poltergeist activity. And I took a photo and published it in a scientific journal. So this happened in Massachusetts, and it was after we grew up. She was at Drew University taking graduate work, and I was at the DIA in Washington, D.C., where I should have been, where at one time I took aircraft identification, so I should have been up on that sort of thing. And we were both on the East Coast, so we decided to go out and see the New England states, and we were going to stay all night at Boston and then go up and see the New England states and come back. Well, we got to Boston, and it was daylight, and so I decided to go on up into New Hampshire, and we went up Route 3, and I think we went in some of the places at the end of the Barney and Betty Hill where that took place, but we came back to Boston, and I couldn't find a motel. Everything was closed or full, and so I was going to go out around the outer belt and look for a place. And leaving Boston, we could see airplanes, and there was a Norwood Memorial Airport south of us, and we could see airplanes coming. We could see their red and green wing lights and strobe lights, and if they landed, we could see their landing lights, and they just looked like normal airplanes.
Yeah.
But lower, there was this other thing, and it was a real white light, nothing else, and it was blinking. And my sister kept saying, maybe that's a UFO. And I kept saying, oh no, it's a helicopter. And I explained to her, if it was a UFO, that the fire department would be out and the newspapers would be out, and it couldn't possibly be a UFO. And I thought she had just flipped her wig. And so we continued on, and then there's a slide coming on next. This took place over quite a large area. And there's a slide coming on. It may have lasted about 3 days. As we were driving along, there was a woods on the west side of the road, and I saw this ball that looked like a globe, and it had a light on the inside, and it was going through a spectrum of blue and red light. And it would be all shades of blue, and then all shades of red, and all shades of blue, and maybe purple in between. And I had no idea what it was. And as we drove by, the inside of the car lit up in green. And I didn't know what that thing was. And I didn't know why the inside of the car lit up in green. And I looked at that thing, and I thought, well, maybe that's why the inside of the car is green, but it wasn't green. And so I didn't know what was going on. But we continued on, and the green went out of the car, and we just drove on. And then my sister began yelling at me that this other light, this big light we'd been watching, was going to come over the road. And I thought she was flipping, just flipping out. And, as I explained to her before, it was a helicopter, although I'd never seen anything like that. But she continued screaming, and so I pulled over. And she said about that time that it's showing a blue light in the car, and I didn't see that at all. But I was on the side of the window toward it.
Yeah.
And I pointed my hand out the window, and I was going to say, look, dingbat, it's a helicopter. And it came over the trees just then. First of all, I saw a meteor way off, and then the thing in the same place came over the trees. And what it looked like was it was going slowly, and it was very, very close. And it had 7 windows, or what looked like windows, and a tiny red light on one end, the green light on the other that didn't blink. But the windows were blinking in sequence, and we'd seen blimps with lighted sides. And like I have a YouTube channel, and I have pictures of blimps flying around with lighted sides and things. And we discussed it, and we thought that they were windows. It was like we were seeing inside it, but it had a sequence where it was like blinking the first three lights on and off, and then it blinked all 7, then it blinked all 4, the back ones, and then it blinked the other. It was like a sequence of that. And my sister seemed to be fascinated by it, and she seemed to say it was some kind of a signal or something. And I didn't understand what she was talking about, but I was in photography at the DIA, and I thought, oh, I can make this wonderful, amazing picture of this thing. I mean, I decided it was a UFO by then too. And I had high-speed film in my trunk and a camera in the back seat. So I scurried around, got all that, and was loading the camera. I thought, this is, just an amazing picture. I could get it in stereo or something, with 2 pictures and everything. And so I was loading my camera, and my sister, when her reported later, she said it seemed to take me a very long time to load the camera. Well, what happened is that this truck driver drove over in front of us, and he parked and came back and asked me what we were doing. And at first I thought, oh, we'll have another witness. But then he asked me what we were doing. And I didn't understand that because there was this thing there.
Right.
And so I pointed at it and said, is that an airplane or something? I didn't say UFO to a strange man at night.
Yes.
But then he turned around and he just rotated around, looked in the total opposite direction and said, I don't see anything. And by that time I was getting the creeps. So he turned back around and asked me, what are you doing? And I pointed again and said something like, what is that or something. He did the same thing. He pointed his head in the opposite direction, said, I don't see anything. Then he turned back to me and he pointed like to his head like I was crazy or something. And he went back to his truck. Well, after that, the thing went over to the airport and began circling the airport. And it had this pattern where it would go from north to south and it'd blink on twice. And then from south to north, it'd go so fast you couldn't even see it. And it kept rotating around the airport, circling. And we had seen airplanes up above it. It made no sound at all. But when we were by the freeways, we saw airplanes up above it. And we could hear the airplanes, but we couldn't hear any sound from it. And so I was afraid my camera, it had high-speed film, and I was afraid I'd get lens flares. And so I decided to run up a hill that was right beside us and try to take a picture from there. And my sister tried to stop me. And she didn't seem to understand that there was a man there, and that I told her, she had to guard the car, and she didn't seem to understand it. But I went up and got the picture, and I got a picture, and I published it in a scientific journal later after I understood it. But I came back down, and the thing was still circling the airport. And so I thought it might go north, and we were a little bit south of it. So I was going to go and turn around the next intersection and come back, because I was just dying to get this picture. And my sister was just dying to figure out what was inside it, because we didn't do anything. And so I got out, I drove out, and the truck driver got right behind us. He got right on my bumper, turned his bright lights on.
What?
The truck lights are a little bit higher, and I was just blinded because he was shining them right in my mirror.
How creepy.
And so I didn't know what to do. And I changed lanes several times. I slowed down and speeded up, and he stayed right behind me on my bumper.
Oh my God.
And I thought he's going to kill us.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I knew I had to get away from him. And so I went as fast as I could, and he just followed right behind, even though it's a truck. I mean, it was like a U-Haul. It wasn't a big semi,
Yeah.
But anyway, I decided what to do was to get on the left-hand side of the road. And then when I saw the next intersection, just swerve as fast as I could off. And that was pretty dangerous because somebody was coming up on the right-hand side and we'd be in trouble. But I didn't. And we got away from him. So I circled around, came back, and the thing was still circling. But then it started going northwest. And I had to zigzag roads. And finally I was on this old, miserable, horrible gravel road that had houses a long ways away from each other. And you couldn't turn around. And I couldn't speed up because of the bumps. So I finally just had to give up, which killed me.
Yeah.
And we went all the way back to Drew and stayed all night. And then I drove back to Washington, D.C., and I had a poltergeist experience after that night.
Oh, my gosh.
So this was a very long, involved thing.
I'm taken aback. Do you remember, kind of as a footnote to this, if there was any media coverage, anything in the newspaper, any broadcast about anybody else seeing a UFO in the area? I mean, it was above the airport.
That's the trouble. I mean, this was before the internet, before cell phones or anything else.
Yeah.
And I was working for the DIA. I was really, really nervous about that. And I wanted to report it. And I went to a payphone and found, UFOs, and it was NICAP. And I reported, but I didn't give my name, and I didn't want any information about me to come out at all.
Right.
And I was nervous about, if it happened to me today, of course I would, immediately find out if anybody saw something circling the airport. And I've tried FIOA, now, but they said they didn't have records back from then. So I didn't find out anything. But, if it happened to me today, I would do a completely different thing. But I didn't know anything about UFOs then at the time either.
Amazing.
And so that the next night, I wrote down everything in every detail I could possibly remember. So I didn't have to go by my memory because I was going to, report it after I was no longer working for the DIA. But at that time, I was inhibited.
Believe it or not, Irena, we're coming into our last 9 minutes or so. So I'd like to turn our attention right now to the Pascagoula case and your involvement with Calvin Parker, in part just for you're working on this extraordinary case at this point, and also because the late Charles Hickson, who was the more senior of the two who was involved in this very famous Mississippi abduction, was a friend of mine. And in 1989, I went down to Mississippi at Charlie's invitation after we had met in New York City when he was working with Bud Hopkins, who I was working for at the time. And there was a conference. My dear friend Deb Jordan Cabell was part of it. But in some quiet time, he took me back to where it happened, and we walked the walk. And he always felt, and I think it's fair to say, that this had been just so over the top upsetting for Calvin, and rightly so, that he chose to put it out of his mind, put it out of his life, not even admit to it at the time, and then years later, of course, became a truly heroic figure in the work with the book that initially redrew attention to the case, with our friend Philip Mantles publishing it. And now you are very involved in this particular case.
Well, I'm involved for two reasons. One is that Philip Mantle wanted me to, he's in England, yes, and he has an English accent, and he wanted somebody from the United States to interview other witnesses.
Yeah.
And, down there they have a big accent too.
I've noticed, yeah. And they think we do.
Yeah. So
go figure.
I had published books with him before, and so I got into it that way. But another reason I was in it was because years and years and years ago, my mother had heard a strange noise, and it was when I was at Missouri in the school there. And she had called me from Ohio and said, "Did you hear a noise?" And I thought she'd flipped, and I joked with her about it and told her, see the men in the white coats and everything. But years later, I looked at the noise and and found out that it was very unexplained. It was a huge noise that went all across half the country. And so I wrote it up for a scientific journal, and some scientists at Ohio State, a seismologist, helped me do the research, and I published. But the sound was the same time as the abduction. And so I had started on that and published it way, before I even got into UFOs. And so it was the same time as that abduction. So I was in it for 2 ways. And at the time, I was a lot more interested in the sound than I was in the abduction. But, it used to be that, if you said anything about UFOs, everybody said, you're crazy going, but now it's a little bit more in the open because of the government and the 60 Minutes and all that.
You bet.
So people talk about it. And back in those days, when that happened, the sheriff said there were about 50 reports that same night of people seeing UFOs. But nobody wanted to talk about it because Hicks and
ridicule.
Yeah, they got so harassed and ridiculed and everything. Yeah. And so now people are creeping out of the woodwork and, like I did, coming out of the closet and everything and talking about it. And so I got to interview a number of witnesses.
Outstanding. And going back to Pascagoula, famous photo of Charlie and Calvin, just the look on Calvin's face says it all.
Well, they had that mystery tape where the police put them in a room together and taped them without them knowing there was a tape, and they were both terrified.
Oh God, I
know. They believed
them.
But then Calvin he just went to pieces.
Yeah, he did.
And he had a nervous breakdown later.
Yeah.
And
he was also considerably younger than Charlie. In fact, he had been a friend of Charlie's son. And Charlie and him happened to be fishing that day. We have the location right there with Charlie in the pictures, Yeah. And
Charlie was older and he'd been in life and death situations. Yeah. And he could handle it better than Calvin could, who was just a young kid.
Yeah.
And so Charlie finally wanted to report it. And Calvin didn't want anything to do with it for years and years and years.
Yeah. Charlie wrote, I thought, a very good witness book on it that I'm lucky enough to have a copy of. UFOs Contacted Pascagoula. The only thing that would have made it more powerful was Calvin's participation, but Calvin more than made up for that in his book. And now with the follow-up books as well, and Philip working on trying to get this into television or film, more people will know and come to understand the seriousness and the importance of their case and their contact experience.
Well, this is probably, with his work and everything, it's probably the best documented abduction report ever, because there were other people around that saw things. And I interviewed this one family that might have watched the abduction and been abducted themselves at the same time.
I would say it's certainly one of the all-time best, including the Travis Walton case and the Linda Corteil case, the Brooklyn Bridge UFO abduction case. But so much more work right now is going into this case, which I am so delighted about. And Philip, who is a very fine researcher, when he became a publisher, he really took off like a rocket and has added so many important books to the literature as a result.
Well, he's just a wonderful person. As a person, he's a Sherlock Holmes too. He knows everything. And I can't believe the amount of work he does. And he helps his authors a whole lot.
Yes. Yeah. He's a good man.
That was the people that may have been on the other side of the Pascagoula that may have watched the abduction.
Yeah. And Irene, I hate to do it. I'm going to have to cut us off now. Will you come back to the show and pick up where we left off and continue our dialogue together in a couple of months?
Yeah, great.
That'd be great. I can't thank you enough for being my guest tonight. And all I can add to it is this is Peter Robbins, Meanwhile Here on Earth, on KGRA Digital Broadcasting. My guest tonight has been Dr. Irena Scott, who will return. Next week's guest is Jordan Pease, director of the Rogue Valley Metaphysical Library, Media Exchange, and Event Center in beautiful Ashland, Oregon. If you've enjoyed this show, please tell your friends. See you next week. Same time, same station. Stay safe. Stand up for what you believe in and be kind to each other.